This is Evan Petzold coming to you after the Detroit Tigers 12-4 loss to the Milwaukee Brewers on Tuesday, April 21st in the first of 3 games in the series at Comerica Park. This loss drops the Tigers to a 12-12 record in the 2026 season, and this one was ugly. The turning point happened in the 7th inning. That's when the Tigers were trailing 3-1, so there was still a chance for a comeback. Left-handed reliever Enmanuel De Jesus is on the mound. He records the first 2 outs in the 7th. Things seem to be pointing in the right direction. And then he gives up a single and a walk, and that puts him in trouble. And here's where everything came tumbling down. De Jesus, he tried to pick off David Hamilton, and he caught him between second and third base, and then he ran directly at him. All those things are positives. That's exactly what he's supposed to do in that situation. And then came the negative. De Jesus tried to throw the ball to shortstop Kevin McGonigal, and it would have been the 3rd out in the 7th inning, but he threw the ball away. It sailed into center field. So instead of having the 3rd out in the 7th, ending the inning, you have runners in the corners, and the Brewers are able to strike in that situation. They break open the game by scoring 2 runs, making it 5-1 in the 7th inning, and then they go on to score 7 runs in the 8th inning for a 12-1 lead. Overall, the Tigers were simply outmatched by the Brewers. As manager A.J. Hinch put it, the Tigers didn't play fast enough, and the Brewers were able to take advantage of that. This Milwaukee Brewers team is special because they are able to manufacture runs by applying consistent pressure. That's exactly what they did to the Tigers, and the Tigers were not able to keep up with their style of play or combat it in any way, shape, or form. It was a total beatdown by the Brewers, and it wasn't flashy. No big home runs, not a ton of extra base hits, but it was just consistent over and over and over again, kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts type of a thing. That's what it felt like from the Tigers side of things, as the Brewers were able to do whatever they wanted to do. Here's what manager A.J. Hinch said about that after the game.
No, I think it started way before that. I think there were 4 or 5 plays, and that, man, you know, we go over it and we talked about it. It's really frustrating because we know before we even get to their style of play, we just didn't play fast enough, and so I'm frustrated with the way that we just couldn't execute. You know, there had to have been, I think, 4 outs, if not 5 outs, that they were giving us if we just execute. And so that, you know, obviously that creates pressure on top of pressure, which is their strength. So, you know, we're going to rebound. It counts as 1 game, and I am glad that we got a little bit of positive energy out of Jake pitching and then get a couple runs. But we got to address a few things because of the unnecessary mistakes just create way more havoc than what's necessary.
Some other takeaways from this one. In the 9th inning, catcher Jake Rogers took the mound to pitch for the Tigers, and he struck out Joey Ortiz. That was the first strikeout of Jake Rogers' career, spanning 5 2/3 innings on the mound. Obviously, he's a catcher. He doesn't get put in that situation very often, except if it's a blowout one way or the other. Well, he got his first strikeout. He used a knuckleball to get it, and then he motioned to catcher Dylan Dingler. He said, "Give us that ball." So he ended up getting the baseball, so Jake Rogers does have the baseball from his first strikeout. That was a big moment for him, but a tough spot for the Tigers to be in. The biggest thing from this game to take away is Enmanuel De Jesus and Drew Anderson. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway because those are the middle relievers, the long relievers that the Tigers would expect to be able to eat innings when they need them to eat innings, whether they're in a situation where they have the lead or whether they're trailing. And both Drew Anderson and Enmanuel De Jesus have really struggled so far this season. For De Jesus, it's 8 innings and a 10.13 ERA. For Drew Anderson, it is 11 1/3 innings and a 7.94 ERA. Those 2 pitchers are in completely different situations. Drew Anderson being someone who the Tigers signed for $7 million, and De Jesus being someone the Tigers signed on a minor league deal. So they're in completely different situations in terms of their contracts, but they're both here right now, and they're both expected to contribute to the Tigers in a positive way, and they haven't been able to do so thus far. The other thing that, you know, connects the 2 of them is they were both signed out of Korea. Drew Anderson spent the past 2 seasons in Korea, as did Enmanuel De Jesus, and neither of these guys have track records of success in the big leagues. If you go back and you look at what they've done during their limited time in the big leagues, even at the upper levels of the minor leagues, not a lot to boast about for Drew Anderson or Enmanuel De Jesus. The Tigers certainly believe that both of them could perform in the big leagues, but we just haven't seen it yet in the 2026 season. If the Tigers want to go somewhere, they're going to need guys like Drew Anderson, guys like Enmanuel De Jesus to be able to eat innings in important situations. Enmanuel De Jesus, if he would have been able to get out of that seventh inning, maybe he hands the ball off to somebody like a Kyle Finnegan or a Will Vest, or maybe he takes down the eighth inning as well, and he's able to get into that in and out cleanly and hand the ball off to one of the big boys in the back end for the ninth with a chance to still be in the game. But instead, things unraveled on him, and that's where it's really hurting the Tigers. We saw that in the finale against the Red Sox, and now we see it here in the opener against the Brewers, where if they could have gotten better performances from Drew Anderson and Enmanuel De Jesus, they could have been in those games late as opposed to being so far behind and really having no chance for a comeback. So that's going to be something to monitor as we move forward. Drew Anderson and Enmanuel De Jesus in those bulk reliever type roles. But this is one the Tigers are just going to have to flush it. It was a really rough loss, 12-4. Now they're back to 500 at a 12-12 record, and they're going to be back here on Wednesday in hopes of getting back in the win column.